Hi. Hi. Today we're going to talk about your lesson 5, response and intelligence. So this is a really cool lesson. I like it a lot because we're going to talk about how smart animals are and humans. Okay. So when we're talking about lower organisms or more simple organisms, living things like protozoa or even earthworms, they respond to their environment, to their stimuli, so things going around them without them thinking or being taught. And that response is there at birth when they're born and they don't have to learn it. For example, they respond to light and heat and pollution and food without the brain having to process that information. And that response, it's like a reflex that has been given by God to keep them alive and protect them. Okay? But then animals with a nervous system have more complex type of responses. And these responses are gained after birth and they are learned responses, something that you have to learn. You don't do it automatically, okay? And these responses are called conditioned responses, trial and error, and habit, which we're gonna talk in a moment. Okay, so when we're talking about reflexes, I think that the best example here is when you get burned or you get cut by something sharp, of course, accidentally. And then what happens? You usually take your hand back like this. It just jumps without you having to think. That's a reflex. What happens is that when you touch something hot, the signal goes from your finger to the spinal cord and then back to the arm muscle for action, meaning move the arm and you just jump, like it just jumps. But then the message also goes to your brain and telling your brain what happened. But what I'm trying to say is that your brain gets the message later than your arm. So this is like a type of reflex and a response that it's in you since you're born, and it helps you survive. Because if it took longer, you would get burned worse, right? So that's a reflex. Another reflex is sneezing when it's dusty, or jumping when there's a really big sudden noise, or coughing when you cough. For example, when you're eating something and it may go to your windpipe and you start choking and coughing, that's a reflex. Or when your eyes adjust to light, that those are reflexes. But then we have instinct. Okay, so instinct, it's like a consciousness that God has built in a specific animal. For example, migration. Birds tend to migrate. And you have many species of birds that do migrate hundreds or even thousands of miles in the fall. And then in the spring, they return to the same distance, to the same place where they live. Even that can be like the same city, or it can even be that they return to the same garden, to the same nest. It's crazy. And they don't have a compass. They don't have GPS. They don't have a map, but they know where they're going and they know how to get back. That's crazy, right? We have a type of bird, the tern, this one here. And the tern, summers in the Arctic and winters in the Antarctic, so the whole planet. His round trip runs around 22,000 miles. Then we have the golden plover, and he migrates from Alaska to Hawaii. And then you have the German warbler. He lives in the fall and flies over part of Europe. He comes from Germany and then he reaches southern Africa and then he goes between Germany and Africa. Okay. And then it's crazy because with this little bird, that German warbler, scientists have discovered that they get their navigation from the stars, kind of like what sailors do. But for that, you need tools, and they don't have tools. And then scientists don't even know how most birds can travel with such precision. They have no idea. Nature is full of instinctive behavior. So animals know how to do things from birth without anybody teaching them. Like, how does a spider builds a spider web? That's perfect the first time without nobody teaching them. Or a honeybee, how does it make honey and build a hive without anybody teaching them? Or birds building a specific type of nest. So that's instinct. They just are born knowing how to do it. And then we have something called learned responses. And we have different types of learned responses, like a conditioned response. That's what happens, for example, when you train your dog to do something. For example, you want him to bark every time you say speak. So anytime he barks, you give him a treat and say speak. And then eventually, the next time you just say speak, he's gonna bark and you're gonna give him a treat. That can also happen to humans in another sense. For example, if every time you have science class, after that you eat lunch, then every time you have science class, you're gonna be hungry. And even if we move the science class to a different hour, your brain starts association science class to being hungry, and you will be hungry still. Huh. And then you have trial and error learning. That's when you try and try and try something until you get it right. That's how we learn to do a puzzle, or kids learn to walk or talk or ride a bike. All of that, it's trial and error. You try, you made a mistake, you learn from that, keep trying, and eventually you learn. And then we have a habit. A habit is a learned behavior that happens automatically without you having to think much about it. It's like a reflex, but it's not there when you're born. You have to learn and have it. By doing it many, many, many times, like tying your shoelaces or brushing your teeth or getting dressed. You have done it so many times in your life that you don't have to think about it that much. For example, when I have to dress Alana, help her get dressed, I have to teach her. Now, put your hand through the hole, put your hair here, sit down, move here. But when you're a grown up or you're an older kid, you don't have to think about it, you just do it. And then you can have bad habits too, and that's a problem. But bad habits can be broken. For example, if you have that habit of biting your nails and you want to break that habit, you have to want to change it. You can pray about it. You can change your behavior, like stop biting it. You can avoid situations when the habit happens, right? Don't make exceptions for breaking the habit. So, and some ideas if you want to break a bad habit. And then intelligence. God made people, and people, we are not animals. We have special mental abilities that no other creature has. People can think, we reason, we remember, we learn from others people's experience, we speak, we read, and people have just we just are we have a superior intelligence. Of course, I'm not saying that animals are not smart. Yes, some animals are smart, like octopus, gorilla, dolphins, they're really smart. And they can learn commands, they can learn signals, and some of them they can even learn sign language. That happens with a gorilla named Coco. She learned how to sign language, like what people that can't hear communicate using their hands. But um, it took a lot of effort to do it, and it's only like limited, and they don't learn it by themselves. For example, we have pets and we talk with them. Sometimes we give them commands and they don't talk back, right? They can signal, yeah. For example, they can scratch their bowl. If they're hungry, they can come bark at us, like feed me, but they don't really talk. But humans, if we spend time with each other, we eventually end up talking. That's what happened with babies. So animals can be smart, but they are not the same level of smart as people. Okay, so that would be